Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading True Tales of Misery, Betrayal, and Abuse, 12-step horror stories. We are about 5 parts into Berenice's story. Don't be angry, it's not spiritual. She showed up to an AA meeting. She was, of course, raped by several members. Then she proceeded to go find her own good meeting, which is what we tell addicts to do in their lowest points, especially those who have been victimized by other members. And she's tried to do that. She's done a lot. My streetwise roommate, who had grown up in a major city, was quick to point out that only nincompoops prey in response to threats, such as those I was receiving, because she's being stalked by another AA member. And she talked me into feeling my anger so that I could take proper measures to defend myself. She was absolutely right. I had discarded the emotion of anger in accordance with working a good program, and I literally could not find it when I needed it. By the way, this is a classic cult tactic of attitude control, especially negative attitudes like anger. You are not allowed to show that. You are not allowed to be upset. You are not allowed to be depressed. You are not allowed to be going through anything. You just have to kind of be dead Mormon face all of the time, right? And taking in whatever they have to give you. Unless they tell you to cry, then you're supposed to cry on demand. By the way, you don't need to forgive anyone in order to heal. It's a lie that was made up by preachers. I had discarded, couldn't find it again when I needed it. I was then able to see how, once again, AA's indoctrination had done me a great disservice. In this case, by tampering with my natural fight or flight response. Instead of the healthy response of anger, the primal survival response, I'd been programmed to pray and forgive. Boy, was I shocked when I made the connection. Immediately, I made efforts to procure a weapon for self-defense, which I carried with me at all times. I also went down to the courthouse to request a restraining order, hoping to secure some peace of mind. But the judge, a woman, didn't find the latest transgression serious enough to warrant a restraining order. It is always issued based on the latest incident. She said that she would have gladly issued it based on the incident before last. I asked her for special consideration, explaining that I was currently in therapy for rape, telling her that the harassment on top of it was psychologically unbearable, but she declined my request with the following comment. I'm sorry, miss, that you've had problems with your previous relationships as well, but I will not grant you the restraining order. By this time, I had become used to such responses, so I left the courtroom quietly. When at last the therapy was successful in breaking down the wall of denial, which I had built with the help of AA, I began to see how it had been the AA theology, because AA is an American religion, as the courts have found every time it's been challenged. Had been the AA theology which had hindered the natural healing process. This is why I had accumulated 5 years of sobriety in the program, yet I was bursting into tears at regular intervals. I had a moment of clarity at that time, which I felt compelled to confirm. I decided that either I was crazy or AA was crazy. I knew that it was time to find out. I was attending a meeting in an Ivy League town which was frequented by doctors, lawyers, university professors, and other upper crust drunks. I decided that I would march down to the old meeting hall and drop a bomb on them. The speaker qualified for 10 minutes. Some other people shared, and I raised my hand. They called on me, and I stood up and walked right into the middle of the circle and told them everything. I told them everything, using my own words and using all of my emotional truth without any of the AA step talk that I always had to tag on to receive their approval. And once you start talking about the cult's behavior in regular words, not the cult language that they give you to whitewash it, woo boy, can they not tolerate you for long. I wasn't grateful for anything, and I wasn't looking for the hidden blessing sent by God. I was hurt, and I was mad. I told them where I came from, what happened, what it was like now. I told them the truth. I showed them the pain. I showed them the confusion of banging up against yet another brick wall in the rooms of AA. It was one of the most important days of my life because I broke through. I broke through the mind control of the AA program, and I could see the men sitting in the circle. Not one of them thought it was funny. In fact, Paul, the 13th step guru, started shaking visibly. Something that I had said had really hit home. None of the men laughed the way the rapist had laughed. Ha ha ha. Don't you remember how much fun we had? I'll never forget it. One of the women from the meeting had connected with my story, and she crossed the room to give me a hug. It was so wonderful to finally have one human being understand. Finally, someone. The meeting continued, albeit in a semi-shocked state. I wanted to run out of there. My heart was thumping like a bass drum. But a very kind social worker I had met in the rooms encouraged me to stay. He was a newcomer, so he wasn't under the spell yet. I will never forget either of them. Many people, both men and women, gave me a hug and offered kind words after the meeting. I was amazed and thrilled. Compassion, at last. The kind people seemed to be the quieter ones, not the ones who talked the talk, but the ones who were more human, the ones who weren't too programmed. But I can also attest to the sickness in the rooms. A notable portion of the meeting, the party liners it seemed, focused on how I had disgraced myself and compromised my dignity by revealing this story. My dignity would have been preserved with silence, the very same silence which protects the rapists and gives power to crime. I later learned through the gossip mill that the kind woman who crossed the room during the meeting to offer me a hug was reprimanded by an old-timer for doing so. Can you imagine reprimanding someone for exhibiting kindness because it breaks the goddamned format? Also, some men whom I'd known from meetings for years reacted to my story by pointing and laughing as they elbowed each other in the ribs. I know what they think. You reap what you sow, baby. Never mind that our culture infects women with a horrible double message. To find love, be schmexy and alluring. But if anyone grapes you, it's your fault because you were schmexy and alluring. Never mind that women are called whores, tramps, and sluzzes for engaging in the same schmexual activity which elevates men to the status of stud, and that almost no such derogatory terms even exist to describe male schmexual behavior. Never mind that Christianity, the religion which laid the groundwork for our culture, as well as the AA program, flat out tells us that woman was fashioned from the rib of a man who was created in God's image. And you asked me why I drank. I can't even begin to describe the schmexist behavior I've witnessed in the room over the years. I remember one father and son team in particular who were both in AA. I learned from one of my girlfriends who was living in the local halfway house that the son had made the moves on her in a big way, even before he'd gotten his 1-year piece. The father, an old-timer, had told him it was okay to have schmex with the halfway house girls as long as he didn't get into an emotional entanglement. It's okay to screw him as long as you don't feel anything above the waist. Of course, this makes him the stud and her the sluz. He gains and she loses. This double standard is so deeply embedded in our culture, not to mention AA, that it goes by without the wink of an eye. And acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. Cults always do this version of blaming the individual for the systemic problem. In Nexium, they even called their program The Tech to make it more implied subconsciously that if there's a problem, the problem's not with the tech, it's with you. I remember bands of men assembling for private big book meetings. These spiritual sessions would result in the pack members acting as if anything they did was excusable because anyone who they hurt had put themselves in a position to be hurt. I remember one guy, a grandfather for heaven's sake, who was sponsoring 8 or more guys at once. He used to throw parties at his house, after which the younger women from the club, ages 17 to 20, would be invited to sleep over. One of the girls, just a few years past the age of consent, ended up becoming his girlfriend. I really didn't think much of this at the time, but today I shudder because this grandpa is one of the men who laughed upon hearing about my grape. His attitude is that grape is no more than slightly aggressive schmex that a woman didn't plan on having that day. Our legal system defines it as a felony, but the big book seems to override the legal definitions in the rooms, since it's held up to be spiritually inspired and therefore the word of God. The psychological fallout, which can last for years, is just an overreaction in their eyes.